Hey guys, it's Brigitte with San Diego Seed Company. Today I'm going to answer one of the most common questions we get all the time, and it's when do you start your crops and what do you start when and do you direct sow it, do you transplant it? It's very confusing if you're a brand new gardener, and that's what we're here for. That is why we started our company, is so that we can help you in the beginning stages of your gardening career to become a really good gardener and produce a lot of food and beautiful flowers for your family to enjoy. So it's going to be kind of a two-parter here. I'm going to talk about spring seed starting, and I'm going to make it very general so that any part of the United States can take this information. And I'm also going to talk about very specific information for zone 9 and 10. Now, before I get into that, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button so you can be notified anytime we put out a video. And in particular, you might want to bookmark this video so you can re-review it anytime you have questions about what to start. So let's get into it. For those of you who know us, you know that we are in zone 10. We're in San Diego, and we specialize in information and plants that do well in zone 9 and 10. Doesn't mean you can't grow our seeds across the United States, but my expertise is here in zone 9 and 10. So we have for you this amazing calendar that we have made, which has all of the information you need to know and tells you exactly month by month what you should be planting. So for those of you who are lucky enough to live in zone 9 and 10, this is your Bible here. We've already made it for you. We've put in hundreds and hundreds of man hours into developing this calendar so that it has all of the information you need to know. Now, what's really cool about it is, boom, we made it this way specifically. So this little back panel pulls off, and you have here a quick glance planting chart, which tells you exactly when you were going to direct sow or transplant all of your veggies, and then we even created a separate one for flowers. Now, we did this specifically so you can take this off, you can pin it in your greenhouse, in your garage, in your office, wherever you need, so that you don't have to flip through the calendar to look at that. So that's part one, and this is everything you need to know. This is more than a decade of advice on one piece of paper here. So that's that part. And then we actually have the calendar, which if you flip month by month, it's going to give you tons of really good gardening information. There's troubleshooting guides, there's information on pest management, but at the very bottom it tells you what to plant in every single month. And it is divided by vegetables, pollinators, and herbs. It also has QR codes so that you can watch the videos that are associated with that month. So content that we've shot that would be helpful for you. So I really cannot talk about this enough. This is my love child. This project has been something we've worked on for 2 years, and it's packed with really good information. So this is for zone 9 and 10, but this video is not an ad for you to buy that calendar. This video is all about seed starting for the whole United States. So I'm going to give you information that you can use if you're in zone 6 or 4, anywhere, or even if you're in zone 9 and 10 and you don't want to buy the calendar. Here's the big picture bullet point information you need to know so that you can make the right decisions on what to plant when. So I've got this little board here, and so I'm going to talk about each crop one by one and give you information on why we do it the way that we do so that you know and can apply that in your garden. So I'm going to start first with tomatoes. Now, the T stands for transplanting, and that's because typically you start your tomatoes indoors in a greenhouse, or in zone 9 and 10 you can do it outside, but they're relatively small seeds, and it's best if you start them in some type of starter pot. You can see like this. You can start them in, these are just recycled pots that we've used from previous years. You also can do them in trays like we have over here. But the point is that they're typically started in something and then transplanted out. Now, let's ask the question why that is. Well, that's because, especially if you're in zone 8, 7, 6, all the way down into the colder climates, sorry, got distracted. The seasons can be relatively short. the time in which you have a frost-free, warm season to grow your tomatoes can be short. And so you want to start them early in a protected environment to get them up and growing to a good size so you can stick them into the garden and plant them and get them growing and get a good harvest before your first fall frost comes. So I'll give an example. So we've got our tomatoes here, we planted them in December, and we can do that because we don't get a frost here in zone 10. We're close enough to the coast, it's warm enough. Now in Kansas, where I'm from, you typically don't start your tomatoes until Mother's Day. So that's way later. And that's because it can be cold well until the last part of May. So you start them, get them up and growing. The moment that there's no threat of frost, the plants go out into the ground. That's how that works. Now, I'm giving you this big picture information because there are microclimates and there are considerations that you need for your particular garden. And I'm not a genie. I can't look into a crystal ball and say, okay, Jim in North Dakota, you need to plant your tomatoes on this day. And anybody who does that, I don't really know if they know exactly what they're talking about because there's so many factors that play into when you plant your crops. What's the soil temperature? How long is your growing season? All of these considerations. But for tomatoes, I put them on first on the list because they are the most forgiving. You can start them pretty early. They really don't mind being transplanted. They are happy in pots until they go into the ground. And if you use row cover, if you're in a particularly cold area, they can make it through a cool spring until summertime. So very forgiving. So that's the first one here. So for zone 9 and 10, a rough timing of when you would start your tomato seeds. Now again, I want to point out that I'm talking about starting from seed. We are a seed company. You can start these as early as late December. Now, you do want to consider the sunlight. We have a grow light here that we've used because in December the days are very short and the sun is very low in the horizon, and so we have to add a little bit of supplemental light. Now, that's pretty darn early. For most backyard gardeners, you don't have to start that early. If you start them in February, you're going to be well ahead of the game. They're going to grow very quickly and happily. The temperatures are going to get warmer and you're really just going to have a very easy time. So around February, rough estimate for starting your tomato seeds. But we have a very long window, so you could start them from February. I mean, you can start them well into the summer if you want, because for zone 9 and 10, we don't typically get cold until almost November. So that's a big difference to think about. Next here we have eggplant. And also, I have a transplant sign here, and that is, again, because eggplants are typically started in a small pot or a cell and transplanted out. Now, eggplants and peppers are very similar in that they require quite a bit of warmth in the soil for the seeds to germinate. So if you're in a particularly cold area and you want to start your eggplants or your peppers early, you might need a heating mat that goes underneath the tray. So for us in our greenhouse, we haven't started these because I don't have enough heating mats to do the 30 trays of peppers that I need for the farm. So I simply just wait until the greenhouse gets warm enough and our temperatures get warm enough to start the seeds in the pots without the heating mat. Now, if you were in colder climates, so north of us, if you're in zone 8, 7, 6, so on, you might want to get a heating mat. They're very inexpensive, and it will allow you to start your peppers a lot earlier than if you wait for the soil just to get warm enough. So those two are very different. So for zone 9 and 10, you can start your peppers really in March. It is warm enough for you to start them, especially if you're going to start them indoors or in a greenhouse or a protected environment. If you were in colder climates, you might want to wait a little bit later in the season. So April might be when you start your peppers. But again, the most important part is to know that they like warm soil. They're a tropical plant. They originated in tropical climates, and so they really need warm soil to germinate and to grow and to be happy. So ask yourself, when is the soil going to be warm enough to start these? And that's whether you start them in pots or otherwise. You need to make sure you have warm soil with a heating mat. Maybe my grandma used to just put the trays on top of the dryer or on top of the fridge. Older fridges in particular kind of run and they hum and they stay warm. So you can be creative, you don't have to buy the heating mat, but if your peppers and your eggplants are not germinating, that's probably why. Next, we have beans. And these have a D on them, bean and corn, and that's because they're
dumb.
No, I love beans, I don't love corn. No, it's because you direct sow them. Thanks, Jeff. You direct sow them, and this is an important information to know because it's gonna help guide your decision on when to plant them. Because you plant them directly in the soil, in the garden, you need to wait until the weather temperatures and the soil and your climate is warm enough to facilitate the germination and the growth of those plants. So for that reason, beans and corn and cucumbers, and really squash and pumpkins, are one of the last things that I plant in the spring because I'm waiting for the soil to get warm enough for the nighttime temperatures to be well above 50 for these plants to grow really well. So I'm giving you this big picture information because it's gonna help you decide in your particular climate when you wanna plant these. So you can see here in May, we have listed squash, which is a lot later in the season, and that's because you're waiting for the soil to get warm because it's direct sown. Now, also, we have watermelon. I didn't put it on the list. So watermelon, also a tropical plant, likes to be planted later in the season. So because it's direct sown, we know that we have to wait until the weather patterns are consistent enough to make sure that this plant grows happy and isn't hit with frost, super cold temperatures, anything like that. Now, you can, if you wanted to, transplant watermelons, but why? They grow so easy, directly sown, and they don't really, they can be stunted if you start them in trays and plant them out because their roots get disturbed, and they have very strong roots that need to go directly into the soil. So that's for watermelon. Now, so you can see on the calendar, we have all of these listed. So here's May. If we flip to June, you can see in June, we also have pumpkins and gourds. Now that's pretty late in the season. Now, I really wish that you guys were here live with me so I could actually quiz you and ask you, why do you think that is? Well, it's because pumpkins and gourds are direct sown and they like a lot of heat. And so you need to plant them later in the season when you're guaranteeing that there's no frost, there's no super cold temperatures, and that the plants are really gonna thrive. And the day length is going to be long enough that they're just gonna grow and grow and grow and grow. So that's why that's listed there. So if you look at our little seed starting list here, we're gonna continue to move down. Cucumbers, it says T/D, so transplant / direct sow. That's because you really can do it either way. But again, if you're in zone 8, 7, 6, and so on, you need to make sure that the soil temperatures are warm enough, and these are very frost sensitive plants. You gotta make sure that there's no cool weather coming after you plant them. So I've been talking a lot about soil temperature, and it's nothing that you have to remember. You can simply Google it, it's in the calendar. We have a really good informational sheet on our website that tells you what soil temperatures each crop needs. But as a general rule of thumb, keep in mind that if you're going to direct sow them, the soil temperature needs to be a little bit warmer than if you're going to transplant them. And again, it's because here in my greenhouse, I can manipulate the soil temperature, I can warm up this greenhouse to make sure that the plants are happy. I can't do that when I direct sow something. So that bit of information is even more critical because Mother Nature has more control than you do. So that's really important. So cucumbers, you can direct sow or you can transplant them. And it kind of, on our farm, it depends on what's going on. If I don't have any room in the greenhouse, I will just direct sow the cucumbers in the ground. If I don't have any room on the farm, but I need to get them started and I haven't pulled out crops, I will transplant them in the greenhouse, or I will plant them in pots in the greenhouse and transplant them out. Cucumbers are pretty forgiving. For those of you that live in areas that get frost, it's important to know that these are frost sensitive plants. So if you plant them out and then you get a cold spurt or a late season frost in April, depending on where you're at, it will kill your cucumber plants. So that's an important bit of information to know. So for peppers, we talked about those with eggplants. Peppers and eggplants are very similar. Those I would plant a little bit later in the season because they need that warmth. And lastly, you can see here, potatoes. Obviously, they're one I forgot because it's in a different color. But potatoes, they are a spring crop for us here in zone 9 and 10. So we plant them anywhere at the beginning of the year, and they will send their shoots up, and as long as they don't get any hard frost on top of the leaves, they grow happy and healthy. Super simple. So for zone 9 and 10, you would plant them beginning of the year and let them grow through the spring. As the days get longer, that's what tells the plant to produce more tubers or roots that you're going to eat. And they really enjoy cooler temperatures. A little pro tip for you here: potatoes and sweet potatoes are two different crops. So potatoes like cooler temperatures, whereas sweet potatoes are very tropical and they like really warm temperatures. We typically plant those late spring, summer, and let them grow through the hottest part of the year and harvest them in the fall. So a totally different crop here. I've given you tons and tons of information, and this is one of the questions that you will have throughout most of your gardening career as a beginning gardener. There are three main points that I want to point out to you that I think will help you make the decisions you need to make about when you plant something on a farm. One, always ask yourself, does that crop like cool temperatures or warm temperatures? That's really going to differentiate when the plant grows. You know, if that plant thrives in warm temperatures, then you're probably going to start it in the spring and it's going to grow through the summer. If that plant loves cool temperatures, you're probably going to start it in the fall and grow it fall through winter, or until you get your first frost if you're in an area that gets frost. The other important factor to think about is, do you direct sow or do you transplant it? If you're going to transplant it, you can start it a little bit earlier because you can protect them, you can baby them until the outdoor temperatures get to a point where they can thrive. If you're going to direct sow them, you really got to wait until Mother Nature gives you the okay to plant it outside and that there's not going to be any frost or any crazy weather events. That's part of what makes farming and gardening so hard, is that you are at the mercy of something that you totally cannot control. And now with climate change, that's changing even more. So direct sown crops can be a little more of a challenge. If you are in zone 9 and 10, again, this calendar is a holy Bible. We'll tell you exactly when to plant it. We also have tons of this information on our website. If you were outside zone 9 and 10, we've given you some general ideas of when you start them, and hopefully that will help you get started and you'll have a very bountiful, happy garden this spring.